Hello everybody, welcome back. This was a special lecturette that I developed for you guys for this semester, or pandemic semester, as probably it will come to be known. We've done these lecturettes, featured emotions, on a semester by semester basis, and this one's going to be problematic. I mean, I'm hoping that on the one hand it's inspiring, but and inspiring in making us, putting us in touch with our courage to a greater extent, but also inspiring to think about what courage is. And we're going to ask the kind of age-old question for our course for Psychology of Emotion is courage an emotion, right? And if not, what else might it be? So let's talk some about courage, and we see here the courageous during our pandemic time. We have a bunch of healthcare workers outside doing our famous OH-IO pose, as we've done throughout the course, this one being very fresh, very current, and very topical. And I'm going to call this the irony of courage, and that should unfold as we progress through it. So the irony alert here is, and let's go to Mark Twain, courage is resistance of fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. So the idea is that when we become courageous, or when we act courageously, when we view a situation and act in a situation with courage, it's not that fear has gone away, right? It's not the absence of fear, it's doing this in spite of the fear, so to speak. And we're going to see, I'm going to have a lot of quotes interspersed throughout here that kind of look at that. Historically, courage, when we look at it, the Greek, thoros, loosely translated, and there's a lot of different translations that are possible here, but boldness or confidence, so we can go back to that idea. And we might ask the question, are some people just born more confident? Or is this something that we acquire as part of our developmental legacy? Hard to know. Nietzsche described the will to power as taking this on one's shoulders and acting on the will to power that demonstrates courage. From the French, cœur is heart. But when we talk heart, we're talking about something that symbolizes much more than just emotion, which was thought as maybe one of the sources of emotion historically. But to have heart is, you know, esprit de corps, and this idea of gathering together and behaving courageously. If we want to channel Spinoza for a little bit, and we've talked more than our share about Spinoza, the conatus, the struggle to be against nothingness. And this is where we're going to look at the kind of how the lecture is going to diverge in a couple different directions. One will be courage as an emotion, but also courage as a sense of self, or adopting a sense of self and developing that self through authenticity. So we're going to go a couple different paths and hopefully bring them all back together as we get towards the end. Another irony alert here, that it appears that courage requires fear, and that's a premise that I want to advance throughout, that without fear, then courage is not probably possible. And Erica Young, with her famous work, Fear of Flying. This was a huge work, seminal work in her day, in the 1970s. And what did Erica have to say to us? I've not ceased being fearful, but I've ceased to let fear control me. And this is for many of us a breaking out step, that we enter into this stage of our development where maybe our previous life has been characterized by fear, and the new life that we wish to enter into or adopt or transform into is one where fear is acknowledged, but fear is no longer driving the bus, so to speak. What's this without a topical picture? And here, of course, many of you have probably seen this picture, maybe some of you haven't. And the power of the situation, and as a social psychologist, I always return to the power of the situation, and how does it shape our behavior, how does it shape our perceptions, the power of the situation to bring out the best and the worst of us simultaneously. So we can see a courageous act versus essentially a non-courageous act. This reminds me, in those of you who are watching Governor DeWine here in Ohio give his presser every day at 2:30 to update us on the status of everything that the state of Ohio knows about the corona pandemic, and what the advice is and what the plans are. And we look at DeWine, and the other day DeWine was asked the question by a reporter, and I thought it was a horrible question. The reporter asked, so what is this about staying at home, and the stay-at-home order is destroying agency? And I sat back and I thought, you know, dude, you're equating agency with essentially rebelling against the government or not following the government's order. And I don't think that's fair, because agentically we can choose agency. That is, we can choose to stay at home. The government has asked us to stay at home, and we can choose to stay at home because we believe it's a good thing for those around us, and it's a good thing for the state and the world as a whole. That's agentic thinking. So I was really dismayed to hear this reporter then, hi Annika, equate agency with resistance, because sometimes agency is going along and choosing to go along, but not going along because everyone else is going along because it's what I believe to be right, and it's what I believe to be an authentic behavior on my part, right? So I really think that poor reporter missed the boat entirely, and many people think that resistance is the only way to behave agentically. No, cooperation can be agentic as well. And sometimes it's more courageous to go along, necessarily, than it is to fight or to go against. Right? I mean, it's a contextual issue. So we shouldn't conflate courage with resistance when maybe the most courageous act is to go along. How many of you want to stay home right now and stay home and not go about your normal life? Many of us don't. But we're saying, look, I am an agentic human being. That is, I'm rising above my toddler impulses, which is, I want, right? And it's like, regardless of what I want, I'm going to demonstrate the courage to disavow what I want, or to ignore what I want, or set aside what I want for the moment, and behave in an adult fashion, which is to ensure the safety of those around me, rather than being able to go to a theater and watch a movie. I mean, I know that's a little preachy, but it's another way of looking at it, right? Other times the government may in fact do things that we believe are wrong, and we stand up against the government and demonstrate courage in that respect. So it really is a contextual matter. It's not one or the other. And what does Nelson Mandela say? Well, and here's a man whose soul was tried, his patience was tried, right? I learned, and this is by an apartheid government, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but who conquers that fear. So if you're worried about the pandemic and you're afraid that life might not go on the way we've known it before, then confront that fear, be courageous about how we might adopt to a new life, right? And this is very much in line with what Governor DeWine is saying, that we will not return to normal. There will in fact be a new normal. We have to be courageous to help forge what that new normal looks like, and how that new normal protects and saves us. Right, Annika? Yes, sweetie. Who's courageous? Well, President Kennedy, in fact, wrote the book Profiles in Courage, and in the preface to Profiles in Courage, Senator Kennedy discusses the problems of political courage, and that's something we're confronted with in the news all the time, right? In the face of constituent pressures and the light shed on those problems of the lives of past statesmen, that is appealing to multiple audiences. He described 3 types of pressure faced by senators, and this is likely to be similar to many politicians, but it might also be business leaders as well, just about anyone when you get right down to it. And the pressure to be liked, and many of us feel that pressure, right? So that's not just for politicians. We experience that kind of universally. The pressure to be reelected, well, okay, and that is kind of a political statement right there in it. And the pressure of the constituency and special interest groups. So we respond to many masters, so to speak, and it's our demonstration of courage in how we choose to respond, right? And hopefully authentically, which is a point we'll get to. An amazing book, Profiles in Courage. I suggest you read it. A lot of history involved in analyzing previous statesmen, previous politicians, and how they responded to the challenges with which they were faced. And you can imagine some pretty drastic challenges. Courage, is it an inner resolve? And let's look at Seltzer here. Without a moment's hesitation, before taking on something felt to be hazardous, the act would exemplify not courage as foolhardiness or mindless impulsivity. Right? So it's not inner resolve to be governed by fear that makes courage the quality that's universally admired. So this brings up an interesting point. If there's no fear, is it possible that courage becomes impossible? That is where fools rush in, right? Wise men fear to tread. That is the fool courageous? No, I think by definition we kind of agree that the fool is foolish. They don't understand the need to be afraid in this situation. They haven't analyzed the situation in such a way that it evokes fear. So rushing in doesn't demonstrate courage. Like Dr. Seltzer is saying here, it's more just them showing mindlessness, right, or naivete. Now, let's then take a look at Viktor Frankl, and for those of you who have taken Psych of Adjustment with me or plan to do so in the fall, many of you choose to read Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl is an amazing psychologist who's been through some of the most brutal situations imaginable. And he studied the notion of resilience, similar to courage, not necessarily. We can differentiate it in a lot of different ways, but this is about courage. So between stimulus and response, there's a space. And man, I love this quote because, you know, this is psychology time. So between stimulus and response, right, there's that space in the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And it's the courage to make that choice. And I'm going to talk about some other existential philosophers and psychologists who hit on that point as well. So we see now that the courage to act in certain contexts might be one way to define courage, but then the courage to be oneself. And we look at historically then Paul Tillich, another existential psychologist. And Tillich goes on to say, look, that courage is the central virtue from what all other virtues emanate, right? So courage is at the core, courage comes first. And Tillich is talking, as many existential psychologists do, as the courage to be. That is the essence of existing. Existing in a manner that's consistent with who we believe ourselves to be and who we are inevitably and inexorably becoming. Right? So, when we look at this struggle then, it may be more anxiety than fear, given that fear, as we've talked about in class, has an identifiable source, and it's usually short-term and has a clear onset and a clear offset. So I see a bee, I'm allergic to bees, I say, oh my God, the bee's going to sting me, I become afraid, and this is a rational fear of the potential consequences. But notice the source is clearly identifiable, and as soon as I successfully move away from the bee, or the bee goes about its business, then the fear can subside at that point in time. Anxiety, as we described, is more generalized and it's more diffuse. It doesn't necessarily have a clearly identifiable onset at a clearly identifiable point in time, right? So anxiety then is more existential, and anxiety is the terror of non-being in this case. But is courage facing the anxiety as courage has been already defined as facing the fear? And we look at this central question that Shakespeare struggled with through the play Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. And this is a great statement of existential anxiety. To be or not to be. So Tillich develops then through this three anxieties. And these anxieties then, that we can all share, right? Okay. What? Yes, okay, come here. Do you want to help? You've got a lot to say today. Okay, so let's do this together. We have death and fate, and this is a concern of the ancients. But we see this portrayed in art, and this is why many of you probably chose to do the art and emotion paper, right? Because art is a way that we express and work through our emotions. It's the way we develop narratives, right? So, death and fate. The ancients, the Iliad, right, is an exploration of these ideas, fate and death. And then, as we move, as we did in the course, we moved into medieval times, we saw that some Christian philosophy tended to dominate within certain areas of the globe, and guilt and condemnation became part of the idea. So guilt and also represented as self-condemnation. And the medieval and the Catholic Church, so we talked about Aquinas, right? And we talked about courage as one of the cardinal virtues in this regard. And then let's fast forward up to our current times. And when I say current times, we're moving through the 1900s is where these ideas kind of basically came to fruition, was the anxiety of emptiness and meaninglessness. That is this all there is, right? And as we got more leisure time, I think we got the ability to spend the time, our leisure time, thinking about, oh my God, is this it? Is this new car? Is this the epitome of what I will accomplish? Or is there something more to life that I'm missing? And in our time then, we see the artistic representations like T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, which I don't know if you've read it. I've not read it. I got a copy that's supposed to come today or the next day, because I'm fascinated now to read this as I was putting this together. This is one of the problems with exploring these concepts. It's almost like intellectual crack. That is, you hear about this and I read these things and then I say, well, shit, then I gotta read T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, right? I have to revisit some Picasso paintings or look at the work and the life of Salvador Dali or Jackson Pollock to better understand these things, right? So Tillich's three anxieties, as we explore these ideas, right? The death and fate, the guilt and condemnation, and the emptiness and meaningless. Do we have the courage to face each of these, right? And how will we do that? And are there better ways to prepare to do this? Now, I thought it was a great line from Tillich that therapy is for neurotic anxiety, right? But not existential anxiety. So, and I know many of you want to be clinical psychologists, and this is something to consider. Because, you know, if someone's experienced anxiety, what are you doing, sweetie? Are you tearing the place down? Okay, well, you busted up your scratch pole. She's full of it today. That's Hanukkah for you. So therapy is for neurotic anxiety, and that's when we suffer neurosis that causes us to be, you know, anxiety filled, right? And we'll go to a therapist, and many of you will go on to work with clients who have this state. But existential anxiety is not probably going to be amenable to therapy. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, vanity and narcissism, the compulsive need to be admired and praised, these undermine one's courage, right? Because, and what Rollo May's saying here is, if I am just craving praise and I need the approval of others, then it's very hard to be courageous, to be authentic, which is where he's going to go with this, right? Because I'm too busy monitoring the feedback and adapting behavior that provides me with the feedback that I crave. That is a kind of positive feedback, right? So let's take the whole thing then. Vanity and narcissism, the compulsive need to be admired and praised, undermines one's courage. For one then fights for someone else's conviction rather than one's own. And this is why values are so important, and a well-defined set of values, that you demonstrate a conviction towards your values. The quote, you stick to your guns, right? Requires courage in the face of condemnation or maybe just distaste. So look for people of principle, and we can see in Washington, we got serious problems in politics right now because there's very few principled people, and it's very hard to determine what their convictions are if they have any whatsoever. They want to be popular, they want to be liked so they can get reelected, but that seems to be the limits. So we see a lot of not courageous behavior in politics during these days, and it's probably been that way for many, many years. Seldom do we find politicians who will stick to their guns in the face of and sacrificing their potential reelection. So, now, let's talk about existential psychology then and the creation of personality. I'm going to talk about Rollo May here and existential psychology as growing out of existential philosophy, and we've discussed this in the past, that philosophy did in fact essentially give birth to psychology through the 18 and 1900s. Existential psychology then Where the humanists see a goal of self-actualization, and so if we look at Carl Rogers, we look at Abraham Maslow, we see self-actualization for Maslow especially as the highest order human need. And of course, unconditional positive regard was added into the mix by Carl Rogers, added to self-actualization, becoming the best you that you can be. Authenticity, the existentialists see the goal of authenticity as you as becoming the most authentic or genuine you. And unlike, Maslow gave us his list of be values, hey, be this stuff and you'll be self-actualized, the existentialists say, they say authenticity is living in a way that's compatible with one's physical, mental, and spiritual components. And it's a more difficult path than self-actualization because it's not defined for us. It's a process of self-discovery and self-definition. And that's where it becomes problematic, because now I have to become committed to becoming who I am without knowing who I am, but thinking in terms of potential. So the opposition of courage in our society, according to Rollo May, is not cowardice, it's conformity. So let me leave you with that thought for a minute, and we're going to come back for part 2 here.